The marsh smelled like wet earth and failure. Tall reeds stretched endlessly across the shallow water. Mud swallowed every step. Mosquitoes filled the evening air. The only structure on the entire property was a collapsing wooden duck blind leaning sideways into the reeds. Most people drove past without slowing down. 21-year-old Claire Dawson saw something different. Not opportunity. Shelter. It was the only land she could still afford. 3 months earlier, she had been planning her final year of college. She worked evenings at a small engineering consulting firm. Her grades were excellent. Life wasn't easy, but it was moving forward. Then everything collapsed. The firm lost its largest contract and closed almost overnight. Claire lost her job. Without income, she couldn't keep her apartment. Student loans consumed what little savings she had. She searched everywhere for work. Restaurants, retail stores, warehouses. Nothing lasted. Eventually, her landlord handed her an eviction notice. She packed everything she owned into her aging hatchback. 2 suitcases, a toolbox, several engineering textbooks, and a weathered leather notebook that had belonged to her grandfather. That notebook never left her side. Grandpa Thomas Dawson had been a land surveyor for almost 50 years. As a child, Claire spent summers riding beside him through forests, farms, and forgotten back roads. He taught her something unusual. Never judge land by what people say it's worth. He would smile. Judge it by what people forgot to notice. She never forgot those words. One rainy afternoon, while scrolling through county tax sale listings inside the public library, one property caught her attention. Parcel 1187. Marshland. Minimum bid, $2,000. No bidders. No improvements. No development potential. Most buyers ignored wetlands. Claire almost did too. Then she noticed the survey description. The legal boundary seemed oddly complicated. Far more detailed than a worthless swamp required. Curious, she pulled Grandpa's notebook from her backpack. Inside rested one folded county map he had marked decades earlier. Her pulse quickened. One faded pencil circle surrounded exactly the same marsh. Beside it, Grandpa had written only 4 words. Check the original deeds. Nothing else. No explanation. The following morning, Claire visited the county records office. The oldest property files had been archived downstairs. Most hadn't been opened in decades. Hours passed. Finally, she located the original ownership records dating back nearly 80 years. Something immediately seemed strange. The land itself changed hands several times, but one page referenced separate mineral rights. No further documents appeared. The trail simply stopped. The clerk shrugged. Old county records aren't always complete. Claire wasn't convinced. Grandpa never circled random properties. 2 days later, she spent every remaining dollar buying parcel 1187. The cashier actually looked surprised. "You're sure?" Claire nodded. "It's exactly what I want." Outside, she laughed quietly. Technically, she had just become homeless and a landowner. The first week proved difficult. She parked beside the marsh every evening. A small camping tent became her home. She used a nearby public campground for showers whenever she could afford it. Locals often stopped to ask questions. Most thought she'd made a terrible mistake. One elderly fisherman chuckled. "Girl, ain't nothing in that swamp except frogs." Claire smiled politely. "We'll see." Every morning she explored. She mapped drainage channels, measured elevations, compared old surveys with modern satellite maps available at the public library. The more she studied the marsh, the stranger it became. The old boundary markers didn't match current maps. Entire sections had shifted. Not naturally, intentionally. Then she found the first clue. Half buried beneath reeds stood an old granite survey monument. Its brass marker carried Grandpa Thomas Dawson's initials. TD. She carefully cleaned away decades of mud. Beneath the initials appeared another engraving. A tiny compass rose. Grandpa carved that symbol into everything important. Claire immediately searched the surrounding area. 50 yards away, she discovered another matching monument. Then another. Together, they formed a straight line. Not matching the legal property boundary. Matching something older. She followed the line until it reached the abandoned duck blind. The tiny structure looked ready to collapse. Still, its wooden floor remained unusually level. Claire climbed inside. Most boards were rotten, except one. A single oak plank looked much newer than everything around it. She knelt, tapped it. Solid. Tapped the surrounding floor. Hollow. Very hollow. Excitement replaced exhaustion. Using a pry bar from her toolbox, she lifted the board. Underneath lay an old brass cylinder sealed tightly against moisture. Inside rested a rolled survey map, a brass compass, and one handwritten letter. She recognized Grandpa's handwriting instantly. "My brilliant Claire, if you found this, then you trusted your own eyes more than everyone else's opinions." She smiled. "Exactly." The letter continued. "The marsh isn't the secret. The records are." Below that sentence appeared only one instruction. "Find Survey Station 9. Claire frowned. The map showed 12 survey stations scattered across the property. Station 9 rested near the deepest section of the marsh. Almost impossible to reach. As the sun disappeared behind the reeds, Claire carefully rolled the map closed. Because suddenly the forgotten swamp everyone dismissed wasn't simply cheap land anymore. It was the first piece of a puzzle her grandfather had hidden decades earlier. And somewhere beyond Survey Station 9 waited the answer he believed was worth protecting until exactly the right person came looking. The following morning, Claire packed the old survey map, Grandpa's compass, and a backpack with supplies. Survey Station 9 sat nearly a mile into the marsh. Reaching it wasn't easy. She crossed shallow streams on fallen logs, pushed through dense reeds taller than she was. More than once she nearly lost a boot in the thick mud. By late afternoon, she reached the location marked on Grandpa's map. At first, she saw nothing. Only cattails and shallow water. Then sunlight reflected off something metallic beneath the reeds. She noted, half buried in the mud was another granite survey monument. Unlike the others, this one featured a bronze plate bolted to its side. The plate carried Grandpa's familiar compass rose. Below it were 6 engraved words. "Truth outlasts every property line." Claire smiled. "That sounds like you." She pressed the bronze plate. Nothing happened. Then she noticed it shifted slightly. Instead of pressing, she turned it. A quiet click echoed beneath the stone. Nearby, a section of marsh grass slowly collapsed inward. Not naturally. A hidden wooden platform lowered beneath the water, revealing a narrow concrete stairway descending underground. Claire stared in disbelief. Someone had hidden an underground room beneath the marsh. She switched on her flashlight and carefully climbed down. The stairs ended inside a reinforced concrete archive. The room was dry, climate-controlled, perfectly preserved. Metal shelving stretched across every wall. Thousands of rolled surveys, property deeds, engineering reports, geological studies, oil exploration maps. Everything carefully cataloged. At the center stood a heavy steel desk. One envelope rested neatly on top. Across the front, Grandpa had written, "For Claire only." She opened it carefully. "My brilliant surveyor. If you're standing here, then you proved something important. You trusted evidence instead of assumptions." Claire smiled. That lesson had shaped her entire childhood. The letter continued. "Most people believe this marsh was worthless because they only looked at the surface. Surveyors are supposed to look deeper." She began opening nearby filing cabinets. The first contained original land patents dating back almost a century. The second held geological surveys. The third changed everything. Every drawer contained oil and mineral lease records, seismic studies, drilling reports, royalty agreements. One thick binder carried a bright red label. "Active lease, confidential." Claire opened it. Her heart nearly stopped. Decades earlier, an energy company had leased the underground mineral rights beneath several neighboring properties. But one small section had never transferred correctly. Parcel 1187. Her marsh. The lease had remained legally attached to the land. Every previous owner overlooked it. So had the county. Because the paperwork had been separated from the surface property records generations earlier. Then she noticed another folder. Updated correspondence. Only 3 months old. A modern energy company had recently completed new seismic testing. Their reports estimated a significant oil reserve extending directly beneath parcel 1187. Projected lease value, approximately $18.4 million. Claire leaned back in stunned silence. Grandpa knew, not the exact value, but he knew the records mattered. Then she found an old laptop connected to a backup battery system. Beside it rested a flash drive labeled Final Survey. She inserted it. The screen flickered. Grandpa Thomas appeared, older than she remembered, still wearing his faded survey vest, still carrying the same brass compass. "Hello, Claire." Her eyes immediately filled with tears. "If you're watching this, Then you found Survey Station 9. He smiled proudly. I hoped you would. He slowly walked through the underground archive. When I first surveyed this marsh, everyone laughed. They asked why anyone would waste time mapping worthless wetlands. He chuckled softly. I've learned something. The land people ignore often hides the greatest stories. He picked up an old survey map. I discovered the missing mineral records completely by accident, but I never claimed them. Claire frowned. Why? As though hearing her question, Grandpa answered. I wanted the person who inherited them to understand their value. Not just financially, but intellectually. He looked directly into the camera. You solved the puzzle. You earned the answer. His expression became serious. If these records make you wealthy, wonderful. But never forget, the marsh was never worthless. People simply stopped looking carefully. The recording ended. Claire remained seated for several minutes, not thinking about millions, thinking about Grandpa. Everything he ever taught her suddenly fit together. The following weeks became a whirlwind. A respected energy law firm verified every document. Independent title experts confirmed the mineral rights had never legally transferred away from Parcel 1187. The lease remained fully enforceable. The energy company immediately negotiated a revised agreement. Claire retained ownership of the land while granting carefully limited drilling rights through directional drilling from neighboring property, preserving almost the entire wetland ecosystem. The signing bonus alone transformed her future. More importantly, the long-term royalty agreement provided lasting financial security. News spread quickly. People who once laughed at the marsh suddenly called it priceless. Investors flooded her phone with purchase offers. Developers wanted the property. Claire politely declined everyone. Instead, she created the Dawson Wetlands Foundation. Part of the marsh became a protected nature preserve. Another section housed an environmental research center where university students studied wetland restoration, wildlife conservation, and responsible land management. Local schools visited every year. Young surveyors trained using Grandpa's original maps. The underground archive became a museum celebrating the history of land surveying and responsible stewardship. Years passed. One crisp autumn morning, Claire stood on a wooden observation deck overlooking the restored marsh. Migrating birds filled the sky. Children walked nature trails with binoculars. Researchers carefully monitored water quality. The wetlands have become one of the region's most respected conservation projects. A television interviewer smiled. Everyone knows this marsh made you a millionaire. Claire nodded. In a way. So, what exactly was buried beneath it? The interviewer expected one answer. Oil. Instead, Claire smiled. Records. The interviewer blinked. Records. And patience. She gently held Grandpa's old brass compass. The oil was always there. The value was always there. What changed? Claire looked across the peaceful wetlands shimmering beneath the golden afternoon sun. Someone finally cared enough to understand what everyone else ignored. The interviewer lowered her microphone. I think your grandfather would be proud. Claire smiled toward the distant survey monuments standing quietly among the reeds. I hope so. Years earlier, she thought she had lost everything. Her apartment, her job, her future. What she didn't realize was that her grandfather had already given her the greatest advantage anyone could receive. Not hidden money, not easy answers, but the curiosity to keep searching after everyone else stopped. Because fortunes don't always begin with what lies beneath the ground. Sometimes they begin with the courage to look where nobody else believes anything valuable could possibly exist. And in a forgotten marsh that the world dismissed as worthless, that quiet lesson became Claire's greatest inheritance.